In this video, we're going to cover off the timings of dice modification in Marvel Crisis Protocol and some examples to show why it's really important to make sure we get things the right way around when we're rolling defensive and offensive dice. Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well, and welcome to another quick tidbit sort of rules clarification video. This is another one that has been requested for, and it's all around dice modification and the timings of them. So starting off then, what is dice modification? Well, we already know that cover, as we discussed in one of the previous videos, is a form of dice modification. Any rerolls, so any time that you have the opportunity to reroll yours or indeed your opponent's dice, that is also classed as dice modification. But there are a couple of other examples as well. So if we take a look at Valkyrie, for example, she has the active superpower Warrior of Legend. She can spend 2 power, and then during the next attack made by this character this turn, it may change 1 die to a hit for each wild or crit it rolls in its attack roll. So that's really important. So anytime you see the word change, then that is going to class as a dice modification. If, however, we look at something like Glaive's Edge on Corvus Glaive, where it says this character adds blanks into its attack roll to its total successes, that is not dice modification because we're just adding or counting blanks. So if you use the words adds or counts, then that's not going to be deemed as dice modification. If it's going to be using the word change, then that will be classed as dice modification. So the process is pretty simple and straightforward. The order of things are always the attacker goes first. So when you are rolling your initial dice, the attacker will roll their attack dice. The defender will then roll their defense dice. The attacker will then explode their criticals, and then the defender will explode their criticals. And then you're on to the dice modification part of the attack. So starting with the attacker will re-roll or modify any of their own dice that they can modify, and that will include things like re-rolls, if they get to change any of those dice that we saw on Valkyrie's card, for example. So that all takes place. Then it's the turn of the defender. So the defending character will then do all of their own dice modification. So again, re-rolls and anything else that they've got that will modify their own dice. Then we get into the second part, which is modifying your opponent's dice. The most common one of this is probably Pierce. So for example, if we had Sabretooth who had rolled a wild on his builder, then he would at this point then modify his opponent's dice. Then we do the defender modifying the attacker's dice, and then that is the last step of the dice modification process. So if you are ever stuck and you are wondering what the order of things are, if you head over to the online rules page, you will find in Appendix A an entire section on timing. There are 14 steps in total when we go to make an attack. However, each one of those steps is broken down into 2, 3, sometimes 4 and 5 different sub-steps, but the part that we are interested in right now is from 6 onwards. So we've already gone through the process of making sure we've got line of sight, and we've put our attack dice pools together, we've put our defense dice pools together, we've added any extra dice in, we've used all our bodyguards and everything like that. We're now ready to roll the attacker's dice pool, and that starts at timing 6 and goes all the way through to timing 12. Okay then, so in this first example, we have Laura Kinney, aka X23, making an adamantium slash attack into Red Skull. So both characters have created their dice pools and rolled them, exploded any crits. Now, unfortunately, neither character got any crits. So it's now on to the dice modification stage. So if we take a look at X23's card, we can see that she has the Assassin Training innate ability, which means she gets to reroll 1 dice in their attack or defense rolls. So we do have a dice here that we can re-roll because we can't re-roll the failure. Because if you remember, it needs to state on a character's card that they have that ability. So let's re-roll this block here for Laura and see what she gets. Well, there we go. Laura has managed to get another hit on there. That is now 4 successes in total into Red Skull's 2 blocks that he has. Now, Red Skull doesn't have any defense modification of his own, nor is Baron Zemo nearby to help him out, so he is just stuck with the 2 blocks that he has. However, if we take a look more closely at the adamantium / attack, we can see that on a wild, she triggers a pierce, and a pierce allows us to change one of the defending character's crits, wilds, or hit results to a blank. Now we get to choose as the attacking character, so we're just going to change this block to a blank, and that means then that we're getting an extra damage through, so Laura will be doing 3 damage in total to the Red Skull. And lastly, because she didn't daze the Red Skull, she has got the bleed on a wild, so Red Skull will also be bleeding once this attack has finished. That was a fairly simple, straightforward attack there with, 1 reroll and 1 dice modification, but there are lots of things that can happen in this game. So what happens when we make it a little bit more complex? Well, Laura Kinney is at it again, but this time, rather than attacking the Red Skull, she's going to be making an attack into MODOK. Okay, so as you can see, Laura Kinney has made the exact same attack again, her adamantium slash, but this time into MODOK, who only has the 2 defense dice. So there's a few things that we need to resolve here. First of all, as you can see, both of our characters have rolled crits. So let's explode those crits and see what we get. Well, there we go. As you can see, Laura has managed to get 1 more success, but does have a failure, whereas MODOK has managed to get himself another block in there. So right now we have Laura Kinney doing with 6 successes and MODOK blocking 3 of them. But let's jump into the dice modification side of things and see what happens. Well, first of all, as we know, the attacking character, so that's going to be Laura, she gets to modify her own dice. And if we look through, she doesn't have any dice left that we can modify. Now, if we wanted to, we could re-roll one of these. And it may be that in this particular scenario, you may want to re-roll one of these dice here, and we'll get into why that could be. But under normal circumstances, this is the only dice that we want to re-roll. It's a failure, therefore we can't do it. So right now, Laura is going to leave it as it is. Now, MODOK does have access to re-rolls, but as you can see, he's already got his 3 successes here, so he's not too worried about that. He also has an ability called Psionic Force Field, and this states when defending against an attack, this character changes wild results in attack rolls to blanks. Now, why is that important? Well, as you can see, we've got 2 wilds here on Laura's side of things, but before MODOK gets to do that, Laura gets to make her own dice modification on her own dice first. And as we know, she does have a pierce. So that pierce from the wild, and it's only 1 per roll, it's not multiple pierces per wild, will turn one of these results into a blank, meaning that MODOK now only has 2 blocks. However, as we know, because of that psionic force field, MODOK is going to turn both of those wilds into no successes, so into blanks, meaning that Laura has 4, MODOK has 2, so he would take 2 damage. Now, because the wild for Laura is no longer present because we've turned them into blanks with MODOK, it does mean that she isn't going to be able to get that bleed off onto MODOK. So as you can see, as it gets more complex and both characters have ways of being able to manipulate each other's dice, it's really, really important we make sure we do it in the correct order so that we get the right outcome. Let's look at one more example. This time we're going to be having Killmonger, who is going to be doing a vibranium weapons attack into Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme. Okay guys, so Killmonger and Doctor Strange have made their rolls. You can see vibranium weapon attack here on the left-hand side are not looking particularly good for Killmonger. So far, we've got 1 wild, 1 hit, and 3 blocks. And then Doctor Strange with 3 in the defense here, doing really, really good, because you can see he's got a block, but he's also got 2 wild, which when we're defending against energy attacks for Doctor Strange, that mystic armor of Strange is going to almost give us a reverse pierce, but it's for each one in our rolls. So Doctor Strange is very, very happy in his head. What he's thinking right now is, well, I've got 2 wilds here. I'm going to be able to turn those 2 into blanks. However, let's take a quick look and run through and see actually what will take place. So first thing that we need to do, as we know, are rerolls. So Killmonger doesn't have any rerolls that need to take place, and whilst Doctor Strange does have access to them, he's very happy with his life choices at the moment. 1 block and 2 wilds is very, very nice for Doctor Strange. So it's back over to Killmonger to start modifying Doctor Strange's dice. Now, whilst we did this previously with Red Skull and X-23, and it didn't matter which dice we changed, in this instance, it's really important we pick the right dice. And why is that? Well, because of that mystic armor of Strange. Basically, because of these 2 wilds, we would be able to change 2 of his successes into blanks. And we obviously don't want that. So what is Killmonger going to do? Well, he's going to do the sensible thing, and he's going to pierce one of these wilds, turning it into a blank, taking that wild away from Doctor Strange. So over to Doctor Strange, and he now has this sort of anti-pierce with Mystic Armor of Strange, so he can use this wild to change any crits, hits or wilds to a blank. And at first glance, it may seem like this is not an important decision. There's no bleed at the back end of Vibranium weapons, so it doesn't really matter whether we get rid of the pierce or not. However, it actually is important because of one final thing that Killmonger has, which is Special Forces. And it says, when attacking, it may use this superpower during the calculate success step of the attack. So that happens at the very, very end. Once all the dice modification has happened, this character may choose to count blocks instead of hit results as successes. And right now you can see that Killmonger has 3 blocks and only 1 hit. So for 1 power, he can actually choose to be doing 4 successes rather than just the 2 that he has now. So it's actually an important decision for Strange, because if Doctor Strange chose to sort of reverse pierce just the hit, that's leaving Killmonger with 4 successes to his 2, and he's going to be taking 2 damage. If, however, rather than the hit, he chooses to turn this into a blank, now Killmonger only has 3 blocks, which if he spent the power would mean 3 successes, and Doctor Strange would have 2 blocks in total, meaning that he would only take 1 damage. So it's really, really important to make sure we understand not only what we have, but also what our opponent has access to as well. And there we go, guys. Hopefully those examples cleared things up a little bit for you. There's obviously too many examples and too many characters in this game with combinations of attacks and things to go through every single possible outcome. However, follow that 4-step process. So first of all, attackers modify their own dice. Defenders modify their own dice. Attacker modifies defender's dice. Defender modifies attacker's dice. If you work it through in that order, then you're not going to have any problems in the game whatsoever. And the last thing I will say is there are some superpowers out there that kick in at certain times. There are some superpowers for dice modification that cost power to be able to use them. What you don't want to do as the defending character, for example, let's say you were coming up against MODOK, and you had the ability to re-roll all of your dice as Doctor Strange. What you don't want to do is re-roll your dice first before giving your opponent the opportunity to spend the power and be able to modify their dice, because realistically they still have that chance to do it. So all you're doing is giving your opponent more information, because You may have had a half decent roll, or you may have had a really bad roll and they'd done half okay, but another roll from you could go from 0 blocks to 3 blocks. They've only done 2 damage, but they need to sneak 1 through. So by jumping ahead and not following that 4-step process, it means that you can be giving your opponent some additional information that you really don't want to. And again, you need to make sure you follow that order at the end so that we make sure that the right things are applied at the right time and the correct amount of damage has gone through. Guys, hopefully that has been useful. If it has been useful or you've liked this video in any way, shape or form, all I ask is that you leave a like. It really, really does help. If you do want to support the channel even further, we do have our Patreon up and running now as well, where from as little as £1 a month, you can support the channel. It helps me continue to make these sorts of videos. Plus, I'm building my terrain board at the moment. So a big, big shout out to everybody who has already sponsored us on Patreon. It really, really does help, and thank you so much for that. We've also got our merch store where you can get a whole bunch of MCP inspired t-shirts. And lastly, we've got our Discord that is completely free to join. Almost 500 people on there now, talking all things MCP, plus some other things as well. So head on over and check it out. Links down to everything will be in the description below. Guys, as always, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.